what the finished one's going to look like. This size paper is a little smaller than the one I'm working on today. So the one I'm going to work on today, I'm putting actually a little sun over on the side here. I don't know if you saw that on the tracing picture. It's not on the painted, my other painted one. But we're going to use mainly like an ultramarine blue, a regular blue. If you have a purple will work. Yellow, and then a pink or a red. So if you have, like if you don't have pink, you can just take red and mix it in a palette with some water and make it a real light shade of the red. But those are kind of the main colors for the rabbits that we're going to use. And then for the grass, we're going to use a brighter green. So if you have a bright green or a sap green, that would work. A yellow green would work. That's a good color to have. If you happen to have a turquoise color in your palette, you can use that too. That always adds a little different shade of color. But for the grasses, then we'll use that bright green and a darker green. If you don't have a darker green on your own, what you can do is mix some green in with some of your black to make it a little darker in the palette. So you could do it that way if you want to. So there's a couple of different options of ways to mix your colors. The size brushes, if you want to, if you have like a spray bottle or something like that, you can get your paints and your palettes wet, because we're going to use the paint out of the palette. Mostly, for the most part, unless you're mixing that pink. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, let's see, I've got a couple different sizes of brushes here. So I'm going to use probably this really big one. It's like a 14, so a 12 or 14 for the sun over on this side. I've got a 10. What we're going to do for the rabbits is we're going to put down water and then drop the colors into it. And I've also got a 6. So something like a 4 or 6 to do the grasses along the bottom. And also maybe I might use that around the tails of the bunnies. And then we'll splatter at the end. You can also take like a micron pen like this after it's all dry and outline the rabbits, just to give it a little more definition. That looks okay. So what we'll start with is we're going to start with the sun. So I'm turning my paper upside down. And if you're using one of those, the size paper, like the 11 by 13 pad that you get at Hobby Lobby or Michael's or something, I tape the edges of it, the short edges. I don't tape the long edges, because if for some reason I want to put it in the mat and I've taped it, the mats are as wide as the paper. So I go almost all the way to the edge of my paper on the 2 long edges. So just a reminder, if you're ever going to mat it. If you wanted to make this a card, you can shrink it down, or once you're done painting your painting, you can always take it to a printer and size it down, or even on your own printer at home and make it smaller if you want to make cards for Easter or something like that. Those are all options, but I'm going to start with my biggest brush, and I'm going to do this sun over here. It's a little half moon I made, and I'm going to go directly into a yellow, into my yellow pan, and I'm going to make my little sunshine peeping up. I'm going to dip my brush in my water, and I'm going to start bringing the yellow out. So I just dipped it in water. I didn't clean it out completely. And I'm just kind of going around. And I'm going to dip it in my water again, clean a little more of the paint out, maybe wipe it off on my napkin a little. But I'm going to take more water and come out. go to my horizon line. I'm going to kind of let it run a little, kind of run around. And I'm going to keep doing water and water further out and out. I'm going to try not to touch my rabbit over here because I don't want it to run into my rabbit. But I'm making it real watery all the way down the page so that if it wants to run down, I'm going to tip it up a little bit and let it kind of mush around a little. Get the water out to the end. And kind of let that dry as the sun coming up. So I'm just going to let that sit and turn my paper back around. And I'm going to start with this rabbit over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, I think, a little smaller brush because I want to stay inside the lines of my rabbit. And I'm just going to take water. So we're going to do wet on wet for the rabbits because we want the paint to run inside the body of the rabbit. And I'm just wetting the whole inside of this rabbit with water, just plain water. Ew, and I just stuck my arm in the yellow. Great. This particular kind of brush, I think, I don't remember where I got it. I might have picked it up at, it's called Lowe's. I don't know if you can see that. That's Cornell. It holds a lot of water. Some brushes don't hold as much water, but this one seems to have a lot in it. So it stays really wet and I can wet the paper a lot. If your paper, if you look at it sideways, it should be shiny. If it's not and it's starting to dry out, go over it again with your water. I'm going to try and be a little careful around the tail so it looks, I can fluff that later. I'm leaving the tails white. I didn't put any frisket or anything on them. I just left, I'm going to leave them white. So I'm being a little careful where I put the water around it so it doesn't run into the tail. And then again, looking at my paper from the side, make sure it's still all wet inside the body. Rewatering it if it is not, because I don't want, I want it very wet inside so that the colors all run together and mix up. Okay, so now you can start with probably either the yellow again, and you can just drop it in, let it run, places around. A little more water on my brush so it runs a little more. Next to the yellow, maybe you want to put the pink in. That mixes well with yellow. Just kind of spot it around. The blue color, I'm using just an ultramarine blue. So it's just a basic crayon blue, but that runs well into the yellow and the red. Making a green or purple. Yellow and my pink are kind of making an orange color in some spots. Purple color in some. If you have a purple, you could put the purple in. A little darker. Looks like it dried kind of a lot around the tail, so I'm going to define my curves around the tail a little more. It's a little darker than I was expecting, but that's okay. So I'm just going to let this guy run together. My sun is still drying on the other side of the paper, so I'm going to move to the little rabbit. And do the same kind of thing with him. Just water him down inside the picture, the diagram, the trace drawing of him. Make sure it's all wet. And again, I'll probably start with the yellow. Just drop some yellow in, a couple spots, a couple different places. After I dipped my paint in the pan, I took it and dipped it back in my bucket of water. It makes it a little less, not as bright and not as vivid, so it waters it down a little more in my brush. So if you want not as bright or as dark as this particular one and you want it a little bit lighter, you can put the paint on your brush and then take your brush and dip it in your bucket of water again. That makes it a softer color. I've got a little turquoise in one of my pans here, so I'm going to drop that in this, see how that looks. A couple different places. This has lots and lots of water on it. I'm going to just dab up some of my puddles because there's a lot of water in it. It's a little bright. I'm just going to dip it in my water, let it run a little more again. I'm taking my brush and soaking up some of the color. You can do that too if you do that and then wipe it up if you don't want it too dark like this. It's going to take a while for these guys to dry, but because they're pretty wet. So we'll figure something out while they dry. But I'm going to start on the other rabbit. Looks like I had a little bit of pink left in my brush, but that's all right. Water him down. Make sure it's all wet inside the drawing. Again, if you look at it from the side, you can kind of see if it's very, very shiny yet, you can see where the water is. If you start seeing the texture of the paper a little more, you probably can run over it with another bit of water. I've got some up here that needs a little more. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side, is just start dropping in some color. So I'll start with my yellow. Couple different spots around. I'll go to my red or my pink. Drop some of those in. Let them run together. Go to my blue. Drop some of that in. You can kind of see here on this particular rabbit that the water didn't get, it's drying already close to the edge. So the water's running around in here, but it's not getting out to the edge of my drawing. If I go back with my brush and some water, it'll run out there. Big drop of water. I do have a little of that kind of turquoisey green color. I'm going to put a little bit of that in. Just maybe here in the end. Ooh, that's really dark. I'll dip it in my water and get rid of some of that pigment. It's more than kind of pigment I would like. It's like this, not like that. I'm going to take my brush, I think, and try and soak up some of this on the ear. So it's not so much pigment and so bright. And then if I go in with just a little more water. Okay, so it looks like I've got my paper, because is rippling a little because it's so wet, and I can see where my paint is puddling. So I'm just kind of soaking it up with my brush on those big puddles like that, because those are extremely wet. There's one in the ear here. Just kind of letting them run. There's still a puddle, big puddle on this one over here, actually. A couple of them, actually. So now I have to watch it dry. So everybody take a drink of water. Sit back and watch your rabbits dry. I'm going to do my my grass with a smaller brush. This is the one that's probably about, this is a 6. So if you do like you could do a 6, 4, 8, any of those numbers, just a regular round brush. And we're gonna practice doing our grass while these rabbits dry here. So if you have a green, we're going to kind of do it. I don't know if you guys participated in the lion and the ostrich that we did in February, but it's kind of the same kind of stroke. So that's what these practice lines was from that. Don't set your practice piece of paper on your rabbits like I just did. Just a note. So again, this time to do these little strokes, they're much shorter than these long ones because we're doing little blades of grass. So it's going to look like this grass. So we want shorter little strokes, and I used that smaller brush to make it a little thinner lines. But if we do that on here, if you hold it straight up, you can see that it makes smaller little lines. And it's like we were talking to Beth about the tree branches and stuff. You want your grass to go different ways. So if you have a practice piece of paper, practice kind of crisscrossing. It doesn't have to be exact or pretty. And I have about, a couple inches here that's going to be all grass. So it's going to be overlapping like this, like layers of it are coming towards me. So I did a row and then I'm kind of doing another row. If you have this was a bright green. If you have a sap green, it's going to be a little darker. And then I can go and do that so that I have a little variation in my colors. And you get kind of see how the grass is crisscrossing and going. If you have a real dark green, I can try that. That'll make it look very dark. It might look almost, yeah, this dark green looks almost black, but that adds a little different. If you have brighter bunnies, this would be okay because you've got the darker color in your grass as well. So you can kind of see that's how your grass would go. My rabbits are still drying. They are awfully wet yet. I think what I'll do is I'll start my grass down here at the bottom of the page and work up towards the animals. Maybe I'm going to start over here on this side. My sun is pretty dry. Remember, touch it with the back of your finger. If it's not cold, if it is cold, it's still wet and you'll end up with paint on your finger, but mine's pretty dry. So that's good. A little bit of yellow on it. But I'm going to start with my lightest green that I'm using. And again, I'm going to start down here, hold my brush fairly upright and do little strokes with just the tip of my pen. Couple different directions. Sometimes it's missing the paper. Sometimes it's getting a little thicker on the paper. That's all good. Leaving little space in between on some of them so that I can come back in with my darker green. If you don't have a darker green, if you only have one color, you could do that color green and then take and mix it in a palette with a little black, and that'll make that green a little darker color. I'm just going all the way up my lawn. Going up a little bit into the above my horizon line. You don't want these to get too watery, but this one, I don't know if you can see this. Let me see if I can zoom in a little here. So you can kind of see this blade is a little lighter. It's just more water and less pigment. These are a little darker because they have more pigment. So that makes the variation in the colors of your grass blades too, just depending on how much pigment you have in your brush or how watered the color in the pan is, the paint in the pan is. It's probably the tedious part of the thing, the painting. Again, on this one, I'm trying to get a little closer to the edge. Because I've actually measured these like with a mat, and the mat comes to about right there. So it's just like 1/4 of an inch maybe that is underneath the mat. It's just enough to catch it and hold it under the mat. And then on these two sides, it actually comes in about this far. So and try not to have them all going the same direction or same shape, trying to make them different. It's kind of hard to do. You get into a pattern of making them all the same, and then pretty soon you got like rows of toothpicks that it's not quite what you want. Kind of practice flicking away from you. It kind of helps make the point of the blade of grass a little sharper. It kind of brings it up to a point by taking it and going away from you like this. One thing I've noticed over too is over here, I have some very short blades of grass, and they seem to be getting longer. I think I'm getting tired of painting them. Get longer as I go across my paper. So that might be something to kind of look out for, is make sure you're saying somewhat the same as far as length and size of your blades. This rabbit is still pretty wet. This guy's getting dry over on that side, so I might go across the bottom here, staying away from these rabbits, and come over up this way and then start working back, just so I don't get my green running up into the rabbit. I notice some of my blades are getting a little thicker. I must be pushing down on my brush a little more, so I'm going to try and keep it, see how thick that one got. Try and keep it up and try and use just the tip. Every once in a while too, I need to look back over here and make sure I'm not either having too many strokes in a space or too few in a space, kind of make sure it's fairly even across the whole picture. I'm getting kind of close right down here, it looks like to me. But so I want to make sure I kind of watch that and maybe spread it out a little more. Especially because I'm going to come back in with a little darker color. A couple long blades. Ooh, that one got pretty thick. It's going to be a little trickier here because I was painting down here where my hand is. Now I'm going to try and work up into the rabbits. And I'm going to stick my hand in the grass inevitably. So if you rest your palm, you can rest it on your other hand so that it doesn't blow the picture, so that it doesn't get down into the paint. So I'm kind of holding it like, wait, how can I show you this without putting it in the paint? So I'm just resting it on top of my other hand and then making my flicking motions with the brush like this. So that might be a way to prevent from going into the paint, the wet paint that's sitting on your paper. You got to move your hand a little further up the brush. What that helps you with though is by moving your hand, having to move your hand further up on the brush like this, your strokes get a little easier and probably work a little better. They keep you doing the right strokes, the correct things. So what I want to do here is, now that this rabbit's dry, I'm starting to put my grass around the bottom of them, trying to come up a little bit on him so that it looks like he's sitting in the grass and I'm looking at it from low in the grass behind him. So there'll be a few blades going up closer to the rabbit and maybe crossing over it a little bit. And again, going above my horizon line here. That's kind of a loose line. I didn't draw it very straight because I was planning on covering most of it up with this grass. If you need a horizon line and need it to be very defined, you would take a ruler and draw your horizon line, especially like if you're doing water or something like that. You want to have a very straight horizon line because water doesn't go downhill. It is straight when you look out across an ocean. So you don't want your ocean sloping to the east or the west. You want it straight. But since this is grass and I want to cover it up, I didn't worry about that.
Jill.
Yes.
So I was kind of making like a hilly scenic landscape, whatever, with my horizon. So it's not going to be straight.
That's okay.
Okay.
As long as you're doing it deliberately. It's usually more if you're looking at like water, you know, or something. But if you're making mountains and hills like that, you can definitely make it lower on like the right side of the picture and higher on the other side, or make hills and stuff like that. You don't have to be straight if you don't want to. It's just if you're trying to do a lake or an ocean, you want that piece straight. You can kind of see, I don't know if we can see this. Oh, wait, wrong direction. This rabbit was still wet, and you can kind of see my little blade of grass that went up into the rabbit's now blossoming into the rest of the paint on the rabbit, but that's the way it is. I'm not gonna worry about that, but that's what happens when this is too wet and I try to paint up to it or over it. I'm going to go to a little darker green now. And this grass is all still pretty wet. This stuff over on this side's pretty dry. So I think I'm gonna go over to this edge and just start coming in with my little darker green. Again, if you don't have a darker green, you can use a little black in the green you have, and that'll make a little darker blade, but make sure you practice it on a piece of paper so you know how dark it's getting. I'm trying not to paint the exact same pattern as underneath. Kind of hard to do. So I'm just trying to ignore the greens I've already got down and put some other angles and shapes on it. Trying to fill in some of the white space where I had left a little too white. You can always go back with either of the colors of green too. If you look at it, hold it up later and look at it in front of a mirror or something and decide that it doesn't look quite right, you know, maybe too dark on one side or too much dark grass on one side and not enough on the other, you can always go add more. And if you have more shades of green, you can always add more colors of green too, to give it that variation if you want. Or if you decide you have too much white space amongst the grass, you can always add more after you look at it, after it dries a little more. So this is a tedious part. The good thing about this is you don't have to be too precise about it because you can always go back and fill in. Every once in a while, you might want to sit back or stand back, step back a little and look at it, see if it's looking fairly even across your lawn, the grass here. I can see that I'm going to come back with my lighter green and do more around up over the rabbits a little more. The brighter green, I guess you think, is like the top side of the grass that the sun's shining on. Darker green might be the shadier grass underneath. Okay, I think that's all the dark I'm putting in. I'm gonna go back to my brighter green, my lighter green color. Like I said, I'm gonna do a few more blades up here. I'm gonna hold this up and kind of look back, step back a little from it. I'm gonna add some more down here just because it looks like I drew a line and I don't want it to look like that. I want to make it feel like that just runs off, comes off the paper. So I'm going to try not to make it so even at the bottom, just go all the way to the edge. Take a little of that darker green that I have too, do the same with that. Just a few places. There, I think that's a little better. Might do a few more. This grass got a little tall right here, and it looks shorter here. It looks like I have a little hill almost. I'm going to put a few more of the bright greens going up into the skyline a little more. I think it just looks a little more even. There, like that. I kind of like that better. Okay, let's see. I think I'm good on the grass there. You'll see as this rabbit dried, the dark as it was, it's still a little darker than the other two, but it's not near as dark of hues as it was before, so that's good. So we're going to do, the next thing would be the splatters like we have here. So depending on how big you want them would be the bigger brush you use. So I'm actually using a bigger brush to make sure I get larger splatters. And if I use a little brush, it'll be all these teeny little baby ones, and I don't want little baby ones. I want more variety. They won't all be big just because you use this, but again, I'm going to turn my picture upside down because I'm going to do most of the splattering up here, not necessarily in the grass, because you won't really see it in the grass. And what we're going to do is you're going to want to put a lot of water in the pan of paint because you want it fairly opaque. You don't want it too watery, but it has to be watery enough that it will splatter. So you can't, that's kind of a fine line. So maybe let me move my picture and get my practice paper out. And what I'm going to do is the easiest way to make it splatter, I think, is to take a brush, another brush, just any size other brush. And I hold it on the end so that it kind of is a little loose. And I'm going to take the brush I'm using to splatter, and I'm going to get it wet. And let's see, I'm going to try and use the colors I had. So I did a purple, a little bit of purple on one of them. And I'm going to practice this a little bit. So you'll see the variation in sizes of splatters here. And that's you all using this one brush. It's just the water comes out different ways, but I do get some of the bigger ones like here, which is what I wanted on my picture. If you want it to look a little different on yours, that's fine too. But it's going to get all around, just so you know. So whatever you've got around you on your table, like I'm getting splatters over here. So I'll try not to get it on the computer, but and then let's see, I had a pink. Those are some big, some small. I'm going to try something. What time is it? Oh, we got a little time. I'm going to try a different kind of brush just to see what it does. I'll let you know if it's a good idea or not. I just thought of this. I don't think it's going to work well, but we'll try it. So I'm going to try this big old flat brush, and I'm going to dip it in my water, get it in my paint, and I'm going to try. No, that doesn't work either. That's much smaller. I think because my bristles are so close together on this guy. Okay, so don't do that. Easier to use the round brush. You could, if you want to more consistent size of your splatters, you could also take, I think you've done this before, is taken like a couple months ago when Sue was doing a class, I think she had you working with a toothbrush. So if you take a toothbrush, you would just dip the bristles in the paint in your pan, and then just take your thumb and flick the bristles onto the paper. If you want to do that way, you could do that as well. That's another way to do this. But this is kind of the look I'm going for in my particular one. So I'm going to get my picture back. And I'm going to, again, put it up, turn it upside down. I'm going to take my two brushes. And I'm going to start, let's see, I used a lot of yellow. So I'm going to start in my yellow and get quite a bit of pigment and water on the brush. I'm splattering over the sky, the sun, the rabbits. I don't know, the yellow doesn't show up very well on this camera, but I'm going to go dip in my pink color. Get that wet. as you're splattering, you might want to kind of get an idea of where it's all going. You don't want all your red, well, you may, all your red on one side and then blue and then yellow. You could do it like that, actually. And kind of do like, say, yellow, pink, blue, maybe the turquoise or the turquoise and then the blue, if you want to do something like that. Or if you want to make sure, like on this one, I'm making sure I have some of the color, not exactly even all over, but just so that I don't have only red over here and nothing over there, because I want a little bit of color all over. So I'm going to do my, let's see, I have my turquoise and my blue left. Oh, and I have some purple too. So I'm going to do a little bit of turquoise, not a whole lot. Some up on top here. So a couple different places, maybe one over there, a couple there. Just so you know, it's getting all over my hands and everything I've got on. So just be prepared. My ultramarine blue, I'm going to take some of that. I'm going to kind of look too. It seems like I don't have much color like right here. Maybe you need a little more there. Maybe a little more on this and some down there is what I'm thinking. So I'm going to try and fill in some of the spots. Maybe kind of go off the edge there. Need a little more water and pigment in here. Got a lot on that big rabbit. And a lot on my hands. And let's see, I still have my purple I wanted to do. I think in my purple, I'm going to focus that like more in this area right here. Because I think I have a lot up here that I don't normally do. I usually kind of leave the outside frame a little, and I think I overdid it. But we'll see how it looks. So I'm doing my purple. That got all over. Big old splotch right there. See that? And it got all over my grass too, but that's all right. Can't see much of it in the grass. Okay, I think I'm going to stop at that because otherwise it's going to be all splatter. I'm going to wipe off my cardboard here a little bit because, like I said, I've got paint everywhere. And I'll stick my hand in it or my shirt or something. Okay, I'm going to turn it around and look at it again, see what I think. I think I'm going to leave that. Now, what I could have done and probably should have done before we splattered is to outline the rabbit with my pen, because I can't outline it now that I have the splatter on it because I'll run into the ink. It looks like on this tail, I don't have splatter on it. So I'm just going to take I have a little towel here. I'm just going to lay it down on the grass so I don't get my hand in it, but I'm going to just kind of show you if I start outlining the tail. Kind of going around the blades of grass. But that's what I would do around each of the rabbits. This is a very fine pen. This is like what size? 01 size, so it's a very fine pen. And you can see the line isn't real dark. You could, if you wanted to make more of an outline, defined outline on these rabbits, you could take a Sharpie, because they're a little thicker and they're permanent. But you could use a Sharpie and outline, and that would make that a much heavier line and give a little more definition to the rabbits. I might actually do that on this particular one, just because I have so much splatter and color up there that I might want them more defined. So I might take a wider tip permanent marker and go around each of them once my splatter's dry, because that would give them a little more definition. On the other one I had done, you'll see the splatters are a lot fewer. And so you see a little more of the rabbit. I don't have as many splatters on like some of them. So these lines on this one are the thin lines. And I think that's okay on this particular one. But again, on this one, I might want, since it is very busy with all the splatter, I might want to pull them out and make them stand out more. And by doing the thicker line, that would make them jump out a little better.